Good day. The impacts of man-made climate change are just too worrying and too obvious to all of us. But at the same time, consumers are demanding ethical behaviour from the companies that they buy from. Staff rightly are demanding the highest standards of welfare to look after their mental and physical health. And the demands for inclusion and diversity are growing day by day. All of these factors and more are coalescing to mean that action has to be taken by all of us, whether that be international organisations, national or state governments, or individuals themselves, but crucially by business. Business has a huge, positive, powerful role to play on the ESG agenda. I would hope that all of us would share the moral case for change, but the good news is, for business, there's a really powerful economic case for investment in ESG, whether that be complying with regulation, delivering long-term profit, or indeed realising short-term savings. ESG can play a huge part in the growth of your businesses. It's sad then that far too many organisations make this far too complicated. It's alphabet soup of acronyms and strategies, but actually we need to make this much, much simpler. We need to give business leaders simple options to enable them to make quick choices to deliver long-term, powerful impact. And that's why I am thrilled to be part of ENSOGOB, to be working with the team to help ensure that Pakistan and Pakistan's businesses are leading the world on ESG and social responsibility. Thank you.
Hi, Nathan Sivagananathan from Sri Lanka. We live in a time where ESG is an absolute must, and it's just not a nice to do thing anymore. Climate action globally needs support from government, businesses, and individuals. You can see from the UK today or Europe today, the weather patterns changing. You can see from the crisis globally with regard to oil and the impact it's having. ENSOGOB simplifies and accelerates the ESG journey for business, and we believe in responsible investment, consumption, and a co-leader in change in this region. We want to leave a livable future for our next generation, and I would like to congratulate ENSOGOB for taking the lead in this space, and thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. By adopting ESG standards in countries like Pakistan, businesses will be able to ensure ethical and sustainable operations, manage risk better, foster more innovation, and attract and retain better employees. Moreover, they will be able to provide measurable data to clients and investors and hence increase transparency. This will give Pakistani companies a competitive edge in global trade. I would like to congratulate my friends Sajid Aslam and Faraz Khan and their team for bringing this idea to life for the companies in Pakistan. It is the need of the hour that organizations like Pakistan Stock Exchange, Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, State Bank of Pakistan, and Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance come together with a long-term plan for ESG integration into publicly traded and private companies. I wish all of you success for this wonderful initiative, and I hope that this will produce maximum productivity in the corporates of Pakistan.
The circular economy is an imminent reality. Businesses need to take responsibility for their product and related supply chain. Consumers need to start demonstrating responsible consumption, and support products that come from sustainable sources, thereby reducing waste and long-term environment damage. All of us have a role to play in raising the standards and being more accountable for the choices we make.
I think at no point in Pakistan's history has it been more important than at this juncture to actually begin talking about ESG. Because here we are struggling with high oil prices, struggling with debt repayments, and struggling with a significant slowdown in growth that is about to hit us simply due to the many issues that we have within the economy today. And while ESG is not certainly a magic pill for all these problems, there are far more deeper structural issues in Pakistan. But perhaps if we start with the basics of environment, social and governance frameworks that are designed to build sustainable business practices, perhaps we can move the needle in terms of developing a more sustainable growth path for the companies and businesses that operate in Pakistan today. And this can be as simple as recognizing the E, which stands for environment. Every time we have
if there are any guests standing outside, we would request for you to join us inside over here, please. Thank you. Are there any? Once again, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a very good evening to you all, and a warm welcome to the launch of ENSOGOB. We are very grateful that you were able to take time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today. On behalf of Seed Ventures and Matriarch Ventures, I would like to thank the British Deputy High Commission for hosting this event today, and I would also like to thank Nutshell and ACCA for being our partners in today's event. So what is ENSOGOB? It is a joint venture between Matriarch Ventures and Seed Ventures, and it aims to simplify and accelerate the ESG journey for businesses. It is also a signatory to Principles for Responsible Investment and World Benchmarking Alliance. To officially begin today's event and to fully introduce ENSOGOB to you all, I would like to call to the podium Mr. Sajid Aslam, Global Head of Public Sector at ACCA and Director ENSOGOB.
Thank you, Mariam. And can we have slides up there? First of all, thank you very much for taking out time today. We definitely thank British Deputy High Commission to make that arrangement where we can have that small gathering. The whole idea is to gather the change leader of the country and pick up their conversation and see that where they are and how we can learn from them. And there will be a certain panel discussion which will be taking place based on the progress and successes organizations have made in Pakistan. Just to introduce, my role today is to introduce ENSOGOB and open it up, and then definitely we will be looking forward to collaborate and co-create a lot of ideas and bring those ideas to life alongside with the industry. This is not the journey anybody can do alone. This is not the journey, or this is not the challenge anybody can do or overcome alone. That's require partnerships. Normally I use one example. When you have to do something small, you can do it by your hand if you want to hold something. And if you want to hold a little bit bigger, then you use your two hands. But when you have to move mountains, you need a lot of hands together and creating that thrust which can move those mountains. So ENSOGOB, a year back, started with a similar idea where we were talking about, we are very good in talking about what the sustainability, what we should do, what others should do. And then there's one businessman came back to us and they said, can you tell me specifically what I need to change in my business which will start that transition? And we said, yeah. When we look at the taxonomies, when we look at the frameworks, it's a very complicated conversation. And then we started creating certain self-service toolkits there. And then we use that self-service toolkit with a couple of businesses and industries, how it's working with them, are they getting somewhere? And that's where this ENSOGOB is born, how we can simplify it, how we can engage businesses, how we can co-create that. And fast forward from those 12 months, me, Faraz, we were sitting together, And then we talk about that, why can't it be a one venture where we can have more people there? Why can't it bring the global partnerships to Pakistan? And luckily, ENSOGOB is the first world benchmarking ally in Pakistan. And that's a surprise because they are all big companies, whether you talk about Accenture, whether you talk about PwC, whether you talk about the large banks, they are all part of that World Benchmark Alliance. And there's a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge is being shared there. So ENSOGOB took that initiative and brought them to Pakistan, so we have the same leverage which other organizations and other countries have. Similarly, we are signatory to that PRI, which also create a lot of knowledge base for us. And that's where we started building it as an organization. And that's where we are today as an ENSOGOB. If we can go to the next slide. So our vision is very simple. It's all about the fair and inclusive world. So we are not talking about complication. We are not talking about we're going to change everything. We are just talking about the very basic idea which with everybody is born. So we would like to go back to the basics, fair and inclusive world. And then we want to co-create. The purpose is all around the co-creation. So it's not that we will tell or industry will be getting instructions from somewhere. It's all about the co-creation because the scenarios sometimes are so complex that if we really try to tell somebody, we will never get anywhere. So to simplify, we have to build those conversations so we can co-create that sustainable future for generations to come. And the key idea is to remove barriers. And the biggest barrier is the mental one. It's not about what you need to do, it's how you will get out from the current fears you might have, how you get out of those constraints you have built over the period. So those are the key barriers which we have to remove to start with. And seize the opportunity, and right now where the Pakistan is, it could be a big competitive advantage for us if we take that journey faster, if we run on that journey at a pace. Next slide, please. So it's a very small leadership team which started their seed venture. Shaista is there as a CEO. Then you see Qudsiya Sajid. She's a development journalist. My wife as well. She's the one who touched me and changed me. So I feel that she can touch anything and she can change that. And she is the chairperson for Matriarch Venture. As a family, we are always like led by women, and that's one of a culture which we have built in our organization and family, and we are taking it to the commercial organization at the same time. Then we have got Jonathan Freeman. Jonathan Freeman is the sustainability director in UK for care industry. Then we have got Nathan. And Nathan is the person who has created the first sustainable seafood company in Sri Lanka, and now he's looking for partnerships in Pakistan to really leverage the blue ocean economy in Pakistan and create that sustainable, certified sustainable practices which can help us to export the seafood from Pakistan. Sajid Aslam, myself, I'm working for ACCA, I was working for Nestle initially, I was working in a telecom, I lived and worked abroad, worked a lot on a sustainability in a different organization, in a different capacity, financial side as well. And then we got Faraz Khan, who is a social entrepreneur and somebody who is always driven through impact. So this is a small team which started with that. Next slide, please. So this is the joint venture of Seed Venture and Matriarch Venture. And the whole idea is to create a ESG tech and database organization in Pakistan which can help the businesses to really move fast on their ESG transition. Next slide, please. So if you look at today, there is a more and more demand coming from investors, customers, and regulators to have a proper disclosures around the ESG risks and opportunity. And there is a requirement to have a proper product stewardship there as well. If we look at the Textile Sustainable Initiative in EU, if we look at the SEC recently Climate Action Disclosure Requirement, all those things are forcing and urging businesses to do the business or at least capture the information and start disclosing it. And now there's another requirement coming from SEC from US is the Scope 3. That's mean anybody working with the US organization, they have to really bring out their Scope 3 emissions data. So that's mean any organization in Pakistan need to capture that information and really disclose it as per the global standard. And that's again, ENSOGOB comes there which can simplify and accelerate the overall ESG journey for the business. Next slide, please. And what we see that, if we're really going on ESG, we are talking about sustainability, what we are trying to create as a business impact, it's a very basic circular economy. the entire world and the globally, it's designed as a circular economy. So it's our habits and the behavior which is destroying it. So our habits and behavior of overconsumption or investing in the areas which are not sustainable is the one which is becoming a challenge, not for us. I think we really owe an apologies to the next generations that what we have done in the last 40, 50 years, or maybe 100 years, that has created a world which is not livable anymore. And we can see that what's happened in UK in the last week or so. And that's evidence that why it's urgent and why we should be looking at that. So the circular economy is the impact. We have to go back again, go back to the basics. We have to reduce the consumptions. We have to make sure we reduce the waste specifically. And anything which we are using, can we reuse it, refurbish it, recycle it? So there are 4 R's when we are looking at that. So we are not using the 6th one, which is in some countries they have started, refuse. They are not using the product if it's not sustainable. We are not saying that this is a time for Pakistan to start refusing it, but it will be. But at least we have to start with the reduce and then reuse, refurbish, recycle, and build it again and again, and reduce the overall waste which we are talking about there. Next slide, please. The services which we are bringing to the table are very simple. It's connecting people, starting with the advocacy and communication, whether it's external industry level advocacy or whether it's internal advocacy, where the people have to connect and come together to really take that initiative. Change is not easy, but if all are connected and driven, then they can. And then we have created a ENSOGOB Sprint as a proprietary product, which are the small bite-sized initiatives which help you to make small change. We do understand, and that's where it's coming from, that we do understand every CEO has an obligation quarterly or 6 monthly to show a progress. There is a demand for that. When you look at the sustainability journey, that's 3 to 5 years. So what we can do small, which can start creating a progress there, and that's where we created the sprints, whether it's assessment and disclosures, whether it's a first step and then the disclosing the progress or data there. So these are the ENSOGOB sprints which we have created. Then there's a technology and data to support that, sustainability reporting, making sure if we are going for an industry level change, so there's enough funding which is available globally, can be accessed by the industry here. Today, if you talk about the textile sustainable packaging materials, that's we need a proper industry who can handle that. And if one company try to do that, they may not be able to do it. So the industry collectively can, and there could be a funding which can be arranged. And the self-service toolkit is the key area which we offer to businesses free of cost, where they can start their journey today. So it's designed in a way where the people can learn and assess their current status. They can benchmark. We have got a data for 2,000 companies across 109 different variables of sustainability and across different industry. So that helps us to create an industry level benchmarks. We are also improving that data set by including Pakistan information more and more, which is publicly available, and some of the information we are collecting through the surveys. So this is a self-service toolkit which we would like everybody to use. In a month's time, we will be contacting you, we will be sharing with you, and we will be asking you to set up a session for 15, 20 minutes and let your team know that how to really start that journey. So at least they have a basic idea what the ESG or sustainability mean and what kind of information it's required. Next slide, please. So we have created a small setup of accelerator. That's mean how we use the different or leverage different areas to accelerate that journey. So we have got a global partner network right now. We have got a global pool of experts because there are some areas which are very specific. For example, in the oil and gas industry, if you get into that, so there are certain carbon emissions which need to be measured, assessed in a different using the different standards. So we need those expertise. So we have got access to those expertise. And again, the bite-sized sprint model I discussed earlier, and technology and data. So put these 4 things together, that's helped us to really accelerate that journey and quickly implement something and start making a progress. We are not looking for perfection. We are looking for commitment and making a progress there and make sure that everybody knows that people have made that progress through sustainability report or through other public data where you can engage your customer investor there. And if we look at the business case, so I'll just highlight a couple of them. It's improved the profitability, it's improved the confidence and the share price in that. It helps you to build the sustainable supply chain because it's not about what you are doing in your organization, it's all about what's happening in the value chain of the entire organization. If you are compliant and your value chain is not, it's still an issue. That's why we have to bring something which is affordable for SME as well, which is working with a large organization. And that's what the entire model is, make it affordable for the value chain. So the big organization can do the change, but what will happen with the small organization who cannot become a part of it, who cannot spend that money? So they will be getting out of those value chain, and there will be large organizations only who will be working together because they are more compliant on that side. And it helps us to access the green capital which is available across the globe. Can we go to next slide, please? Just a last one, why ENSOGOB? What's basically, what the differentiation we are bringing to the table? So the main thing, we are trying to drive it through as a cost leader. So we are trying to drive it through the value. So we are trying to be affordable in that space. We don't want to be expensive. We are creating a solution where the SMEs can become a part of it, and that's where the real change comes into play. We are using a sprint model, so it's not about the perfection and the compliance in a 3 to 5 year. It's making progress every month, every quarter, every 6 months, so the CEOs have something to report back. And then global partner network that helps us to really access that information and bring it to the table for everybody. We empower businesses through the self-service toolkits, and then we co-create the journey, ESG journey with businesses, and we co-lead the change. Change is not easy. We always need more hands. Like if we have to move the mountains, we need more hands to do that. Next slide, please. And that's promised, that's the last one. So stay in touch with us. There's a website available. There are certain contacts available on there. And we are very, very happy to get engaged and make sure that wherever you are in the journey, if we can add 2 cents, we are willing to do that. And if there's a complex issue, do let us know. We might be able to use our global partners and the expertise to bring some simple solutions. So the key value we bring to the table is always the simplicity, the pace, the low cost, and the adoption become easier there. So ENSOGOB would like to become your smart and affordable partner in that journey. So do stay in touch and make sure that we will be sharing more and more information there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sajid, for your opening remarks. Next, I would like to invite Mike Nitharvanakis, the British Deputy High Commissioner to Pakistan, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. You are the first person in almost 3 years who's pronounced my name absolutely correctly, so you deserve a special prize for that. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to welcome you all to the British Deputy High Commissioner, and it's really nice to see so many familiar faces, including a number of the senior panelists who were at an ESG event that I think was held last autumn or so out in the garden, and that was a very kind of inspiring event because there was a lot of information download and knowledge and expertise shared, and to find several months later that we are celebrating this partnership, I think is a really encouraging sign. So congratulations to all of the kind of constituents that have come together to make this happen. And I think it's hugely important. I didn't think I would ever be speaking in Karachi on a day when the temperature in London is higher than in Karachi, and we smile and laugh about that, but it's quite shocking. I mean, the hottest degrees ever recorded in the UK was 38.6 degrees Celsius, and it has now touched 41 degrees in the last 48 hours in several parts of the country. And the UK is not at all, as you know, set up to cope with those sorts of temperatures, and we can see from the kind of wildfires that are burning in France and Portugal and Spain that it's a hugely negative impact on the population. So I think it behoves us all to consider that in a day and age where perhaps because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis we're thinking about the oil price and how do we go back to traditional fossil fuels, we mustn't forget about the commitments that we all made to the climate change agenda in COP26. And of course, people in this audience, your organisations, your companies have been part of the solution to that, and that's why I'm encouraged that on ESG we are going to see great things happen. The reason I'm looking so relaxed today is I've just come back from a trip to Gilgit and Skardu, which was absolutely fantastic. And everybody who knows me knows that I love Karachi more than anywhere else, but I may just have found somewhere that makes Karachi seem like a sort of a bit of a backwater, because it was just absolutely awe-inspiring, and the kind of uniqueness of the landscape and the beauty is just breathtaking and stunning. But when I was lucky enough to stand at a place called Fairy Meadows and look at the the very difficult face of Nanga Parbat, which I think is the second highest mountain in Pakistan, and was told that the glacier that I was looking at has reduced in width and length, even year by year. I think it gives one a sense of the difficulties that Pakistan is going to face in terms of melting glaciers and rising sea levels and rising temperatures in places like northern Sindh and southern Punjab. So the sustainability approach is hugely important, and I think the only real role that we can play as foreign guests in your country is to try and be a convening power and a facilitator to the knowledge that exists here. And I do think that when we look at some of the individual institutions, whether they are corporates or not-for-profits or charitable organisations, there is a lot to be hopeful about in terms of a country like Pakistan, where you have such an incredible focus on philanthropy, on sharing expertise, on helping people less privileged than yourselves, and on the business agenda, because although I'm the Deputy High Commissioner in Karachi, I actually spend more of my time on the trade agenda. Being in a city like Karachi, where the State Bank is based, the Pakistan Stock Exchange, the fantastic big trade organisations like PBC, OICCI, the two biggest ports, all of the main British companies have their headquarters here. It's really encouraging to see how connected people are and how they're not just signing up for these sorts of things to tick a box or to put in their CSG report at the end of a year. They're held to account by their directors, their consumers, their shareholders to deliver change. And I think the greenwashing is a word we keep hearing quite often in terms of ESG, and we must really avoid that. Again, when one looks at the run-up to COP26 last October, November, Pakistan was one of the countries really leading the way in getting companies to sign up for the Race to Zero challenge. And that's not just a case of signing on the dotted line and then doing nothing for a few years. It requires immediate commitment. So I think the partnership that's being announced today by Seed Ventures and Matriarch, if that's the right pronunciation, is fantastic. And thank you very much to all of the other participants in supporting that. I've worked with ACCA and Nutshell and some of the other partners throughout my 3 years here, and been really lucky to meet some inspiring individuals, and many of you are in the audience, so it gives me great hope and optimism that there is a brighter future ahead for us. But it is going to be incumbent on individuals, organisations to all come together. It's not just an issue for government or civil society or the commercial sector. It's about everybody pulling together to deliver greater success. And I hope that after I've departed Pakistan, which unfortunately is happening quite soon, I will be able to hear about the progress of ENSOGOB. I really congratulate you on the kind of group of leaders that you've put together, and it's nice to see the pictures of 2 women on the top and 4 men below that. Let's hope that you're able to add more women to get the gender balance 50-50 rather than maybe 33-66. But anyway, it's a good step in the right direction. But thank you again, all of you, for coming and participating in today's event. I look forward to hearing from the panel experts and the messages we're about to read. And if you think the British Deputy High Commission should be doing more in this space to try and convene kind of different participants and experts, we would be delighted to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Up next, I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Chairperson, Pakistan Stock Exchange, PICG, Karandaz, and she was also the former Federal Minister, to say a few words.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and Assalamu alaikum to everybody. It's a pleasure to be back at the British High Commission. You're right, Mike. Some of us spoke at an earlier event that you had organized. I think it's a topic that is very close to my heart. You have already touched on the growing scale of the climate crisis globally, as well as within Pakistan. I think its complexity has grown. Future forecasts are that South Asia may be down under the water. So we need to really jack up our efforts, as I see. If you look at the overall landscape of Pakistan, I think what's encouraging is that in 2015, Pakistan did legislate the Sustainable Development Goals, and then it was fragmented because this is a federation. So like everywhere else, we have a national as well as the provincial governments, and they need to come together, as I see, one of the challenges among so many other. Good progress has been underway in different segments at the government level. Of course, now we have a climate change policy a ministry itself, which is always good to lay out the framework on how we are going to be achieving net zero emissions. And besides the institutionalization of the climate policy and strategy, it's important to recognize that we have some very good proposals for climate mitigation and adaptation. And we are also looking at nurturing the biodiversity, and regulators such as the SECP and State Bank, and of course the frontline regulator, PSX, have embraced the sustainable framework, albeit at different levels and in different forms. And there have been guidelines that have been issued, whether it's green financing or green bonds. There are also other sustainable finance instruments that the SECP has floated, and recently SECP has a roadmap for the companies, for itself in providing guidance. I see this architecture to be absolutely critical for us to work on ESG financing, or for that matter on any policy level of the climate change. I think there is a transition that's happening, but I would say that it is not only uneven, but it is extremely slow to the extent that you get frustrated when you look at the details of it. And I think rather than fragment the efforts, it would be very good if there was more a consolidated effort to move forward. Now, of course, corporates will go by the businesses that they manage and run in determining how to shape up their ESG space. Good news is that at COP26, we at the Pakistan Environment Trust Fund, with, of course, Farouk's leadership, along with so many others, tried to convince a lot of companies to commit themselves to net zero emissions. And Mike, your office was very critical because COP26 leadership was at UK, and that has offered quite a bit of impetus, as I see. And we'd like to continue remaining engaged with it, and I know PET is doing a lot of talking, particularly with the textile, but also looking at biodiversity issues. Conceptually, it is critical now for policymakers and financial managers, such as some of you who are sitting in this room, to recognize, of course, that ESG has a strong value proposition, but its success is contingent on economic, corporate, and finance leadership's competence and a teamwork to lift the ambition and the game of reversing the damage caused by years of economic and corporate mismanagement that has been going on in this country. I mean, I can tell you of so many corporates that have gotten it absolutely wrong, as I see, versus those who are getting it very right. Like, you know, I just had a discussion with Unilever, which has produced its sustainability report, and it's amazing how they are making a fundamental change and now moving to scope 3, which has got to be looking at really their value chain, SMEs and the value chain, and that would have phenomenal impact beyond the former multinational to now a firm that is leading by example. So what is it that we need? First, getting the policy architecture right is critical. So not just working in an ad hoc manner with XYZ company. I think we need to really work on the policy architecture. Evidence has time and again proven that short-termism, which prevails in Pakistan phenomenally hurts the long term, as investing in green and sustainable growth and infrastructure is the way to enhance the resilience and bring what is very critical to the climate agenda, a just transition, safeguarding people and planet. And it is in this context that the ESG has a bond and a hold on these elements, as I see. Whether it's the Financial Stability Board, international accounting bodies, IFRS, to the newly established International Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or Central Bank's network of green financing, IASCO, World Federation of Exchange, and so forth. I'm really happy to see that our regulators are now moving towards an alignment with the international architecture. Of course, we can't adopt the most sophisticated and complicated, but even if we made a good beginning and really made sure that the corporate finance is aligned with the bank or the stock market finance, we would be able to bring a fundamental change. A second point which is important to recognize is that the ESG, coupled with major emphasis on sustainability itself. So ESG has components of sustainability, but the corporate sustainability is a subject of its own kind, drives our value creation process eventually, and nurtures effective risk management, and hence there has to be common understanding of the value drivers to support business resilience and create positive impacts for stakeholders, which include both shareholders and investors that together generate the demand pressure for ESG and climate action. So ESG has to be working both from the standpoint of the demand as well as the supply side to have a real impact. A third point that I'd like to make is that there is need for alignment of resource deployment. There's a lot of talk, but resource deployment to resource efficiency is missing. Its allocation and use is not right at this point. Social welfare to enhance economic and factor productivity is very fragmented. Some do it, some don't. Some see it as a CSR, I see it beyond CSR. And I think CSR is creating a huge confusion in people's mind that it actually is the S of the ESG. It is not the S of the ESG. So this has to be reinforced through, of course, the corporate and economic governance, which is the G, backed by the boards of the company. You read any literature, most of all what is coming out of the schools in London, or for that matter, UK at large, any company that is showing action is the leadership of the boards. Whether it will be the banks, it will be the Karachi Electric, or for that matter any, it has to be the board that has to kickstart this action. And why is it? Because they represent the shareholders and they are stakeholders, custodians at the end of the day. So E, S, and G together will produce the holistic and long-term solution to build our sustainable future. The other point that I'd like to make is that ESG risk and materiality profile has to be properly organized, recognizing that its strengths go beyond sustainability. So you have ESG, you have sustainability, and then you have the whole scheme of things regarding the risk and the materiality. So for example, a company can have net zero emissions, zero waste, renewable power facility, recycling, or whatever you mentioned very rightly, but ESG requires it goes beyond and meets social obligations, labor, health, and safety standards, all of which contribute to not only human well-being, but at the end of the day, productivity. As economists, we really believe that's a major driver of the growth. Conversely, a company might have comprehensive ESG reporting backed by strong governance and welfare framework, but its core manufacturing and business processes and practices contribute to emissions and pollutions whose adversities risk people and planet. And that's what's been happening, whether it is in UK, United States, or in ASEAN, which is really under tremendous threat right now. To me, the most action will of course come by action on E, the environment. And I got a call just yesterday from a bank saying that we are only interested in E. So I said, well, it's okay, it's a good beginning. We are not interested in S and G, although I don't believe in it, but I'm just sharing with you that when they know I'm interested, they want to have consultation. And then I say, okay, let's move on with whatever you have. So for finance, of course, since I'm talking about the bank, to play its role, we need complete, comparable, and reliable sustainability data and information from the corporate sector. So I have looked at about a dozen sustainability reports, and I'm just scratching my head as to how do I get this comparability. Of course, the businesses are different, so one is not looking for perfection. But I'm just saying that we need a common platform for data and information. So we have to have a balance between comprehensiveness, simplicity, and technical edge. I know since I have to wrap up in another few minutes, I wanted to just share with you one particular element which was by way of the conclusion that I wanted to share with you. That it's very important that of course we need taxonomy and so on and so forth, but to conclude, I wanted to mention that we have formed an ESG task force. And that task force includes, of course, me along with so many other colleagues. And of course, ACCA has been a great partner for us. Now, of course, the ESG task force right now includes a lot of people, but what's important to recognize that the ESG task force is a partnership between PSX and PICG, but along with several other very good thinkers. So what I'm going to talk about is to really share some of the wisdom that's coming out of it, and we have KPMG as a knowledge partner. So KPMG has been extremely responsible as a pro bono partner, and it's the cheapest resource that I have been able to lay hands on relative to what you mentioned. But I think what's important is that we, through that inspiration of ESG, now PSX is in the league of, we have applied for the sustainable stock exchanges license, thanks to Farouk's final yielding to my pressure. Is that right? But you had already started. Yeah? And now we are members, okay? But we will gain a lot from it because, more than 100 exchanges are there and they have done a lot of things which will help us do. So whether other financing institutions work or not, anybody who will come for listing will eventually have to go through that screening. But of course, between then and now, there will be a lot of work to be done. Now, I have to say one of the things that the ESG task force has achieved, there are two things. One is to actually look at how Pakistan fares in terms of the global survey. And there's a full-fledged report on it, so I don't need to summarize. But the second report it has come on is on the ESG reporting guidelines. And that is important because there are so many guidelines. So which guidelines Pakistan picks on? Of course, we have been looking at the general GRI, but I think there is need for more reflection. And we need, in ultimately sustainability, corporate disclosure templates, which will only come through the regulators, as I see, because we can do whatever we want to do, but if the regulators provide us guidance, we will come to a conformed standard. So we are very happy that we have at least been able to produce some background work. We have conducted industry consultation of textiles, and now at PSX we are moving to the banking sector consultation, and we will have more consultations, particularly the automobile now. So we will be doing more and more work, but it will be through the strength of the teamwork, and in particular are working together with a lot of companies that are part of not only PSX but also central banks involvement. The banks itself will have to play an important role. So there's a lot underlying what I have said, but I think to me what's important is having really teamwork to build our knowledge base in this front would be great, and we look to ACCA's work. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Shamshad, for that very insightful note. It's a pleasure having you here with us today. Our next speaker is Sadia Sajjad. She is the country manager for UK, Ireland, Denmark, and Malta at IFC. For this, Sadia has sent us her remarks on video, so I would like to now direct your attention to the screen.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be speaking at the launch event of ENSOGOB on environmental, social, and governance considerations. This topic is very close to my heart and one that requires urgent attention to ensure the sustainable future of our planet, of our people, and also for profit. To introduce myself, I'm Sadia Sajjad, country manager at the International Finance Corporation based in London. For those of you who may not know the IFC, we are the private sector arm of the World Bank and the world's largest development financial institution focused on the private sector. IFC has been a leader in the evolving environmental, social, and governance landscape. We have pioneered early concepts around safeguards, as well as developed industry standards that have been widely adopted by the finance and investment community globally. In fact, the term environmental, social, and governance was coined
So now I would like to initiate an engaging panel discussion on sustainability and ESG adoption in Pakistan. We're very proud to say that our panelists today are sustainability leaders, and we hope and expect them to drive change in Pakistan for sustainability adoption. Our moderator today is Asad Hamid, head of ACCA Pakistan. Asad, could we please have you at the front? Thank you.
Good morning.
And I would like
It's
to
my
now
pleasure
invite
to
our
be
panelists to the
speaking
front one by one.
at the launch event
Muhammad
of
Ali
ENSOGOB
Tabba, CEO of
on
Lucky
environmental
Cement Limited, Shahzad Dada, President and CEO at UBL, Farooq Khan, MD and CEO, Pakistan Stock Exchange, Naz Khan, Chief Strategy Officer at K Electric, and Shaista Aisha, CEO at Seed Ventures.
So, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure listening to the various thoughts, I think both from a policy perspective, from a research perspective, from a practitioner's perspective, and prospectively in terms of the services. So, the few key areas that we picked up, and I think we can mention into this conversation, is simplifying. So I'm sure that we have practitioners over here, which we will be speaking shortly and understanding and gaining an insight that how they were able to progress their ambitions in terms of embracing ESG. The conversation that has taken place, you see, it appears, and I don't think it is something that you have to infer, it's explicit. We are at a watershed moment. We talk about sustainability. You see, ESG, a lot of people talk about impact, talk about social responsibility, talk about sustainability, but you see, what exists will create impact. What exists will sustain. So I think it's more a matter of whether we will exist the way we do and are able to create that impact. So moving on to my panelists, and starting with Ali Tabba for the first question, is that Ali represents a large conglomerate, and that conglomerate has, you see, a spectrum of businesses spanning from real estate to chemicals to automotive. So with that diverse portfolio under their belt, we would like to hear how your group was able to frame the ESG policy and what was the trigger to really get an ESG plan in place.
I don't know. Okay, it's working. Thank you so much. Let me start, that corporates in Pakistan, whether those are listed or unlisted, always have a framework, of governance. It used to be CSR before, and not so much on the environment, and those practices are in place, for many, many years. And those are stringent, being followed by our regulators such as SCCP and Stock Exchange. But today what I see, from the conversation, that the focus is more on environment. Everybody's talking about environment, biodiversity, what companies are doing and, what can be done to reduce the impact, and how you can reduce the carbon footprint overall in your businesses and create a sustainability, that can at least increase the longevity of the businesses, When you talk about sustainability, why businesses doesn't go into second, third generation is because you don't have a sustainable business plan in place. So if you don't have a sustainable business plan and practices in place, I'm sure you're going to lose your way out. As business is evolving, every decade, you see new requirements from lenders, from investors, from individuals, and they all want to understand, what are you doing and what have you done, and what success have you achieved in the past. So let me say, that governance, when it comes to listed companies, I think in Pakistan, is we have the best disclosures. If you look at our annual reports, you see our reporting on sustainability, environment, education, CSR, we actually give the whole detail, depending on exactly what areas and what, the companies are doing. But this is fundamental part of the business and disclosures which we have in Pakistan. So So reporting standards in Pakistan is one of the best in the world. I think it can be compared with any developing and the developed businesses and multinationals. Social impact, Madam Shamshad touched about CSR. CSR was also one of the focal point, let's say in last 2-3 decades, where how you're contributing to the communities in which you're operating, in the surroundings, what are you contributing to make people life better, what can you contribute where the government is not contributing, So in Pakistan, we have a whole list of areas, where private sector is actually leading the way, and we are working together with NGOs on health side, on education side, on the water side, and also now, in terms of hygiene and other areas, where we really have to focus. So that area was always covered through the CSR activity, which is still continuing, So what has happened, as we saw, that in 2005, everything has been merged together, now it's called ESG. And with ESG, is the sustainability, that how business are going to make decisions on the boardroom, we should ensure that the businesses will continue to prosper and able to give returns, to the investors, keeping in mind that you have to have a minimal impact on the environment. And today, I think with COP26 and people signing up, I think it shows the commitment that businesses are serious, that in the environment we are operating, we want to make sure that we have minimal impact, from recycling to reducing the carbon footprint, going green, and try to reduce other alternate measures, to reduce the overall usage of fossil fuel is at the forefront, for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. So I think your focus is more towards a balanced approach towards ESG, where you bring all the 3 pillars to life and converge them onto an ESG, onto a sustainability business plan for the organization.
Absolutely.
Yes, so I think so thank you much, Dr. Shamshad, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure entirely. Thank you.
Can we have that? Sorry.
ये मैडम शमशाद का रीज़न था एज माई रेगुलेटर कि मैं बिफोर आई स्पीक शी वांटेड टू गेट आउट मैं तो ये होल्ड करूँगा आपसे
So thank you once again, Dr. Shamshad. Yes. So if the same question is put forward to the rest of the panelists, so if Shahzad, yourself please, in terms of what were the triggers for an ESG plan and...
I think Mohammed Ali and the earlier speakers all have touched upon it. Look, it's very simple, right? 8%, we're the 8th most important country that's being impacted by this whole climate change. I think if we look at our country as a whole, 50%, 50 million people live below poverty line. If we look at our gender equality, one of the SDG goals, again, we are pathetic. 7% financial inclusion. I'll speak from a financial perspective only. If we look at literacy rate, hovering around 60% officially, unofficially it could be well below 50%. If you look at our technology journey, again, some great stories, but there's a lot we can do. So I think if you look at all of those things, it's really important. And I think for me personally, I think, again, I know there are a lot of young people in this room, but I think it's beyond this generation, right? It's the next generation. I think we all need to think about, if we don't do what we are supposed to do today, our children are going to get impacted. I think we're seeing some early signs of that, whether it's the UK, London weather, whether it's what happened in Karachi and in Pakistan and in India earlier this year. I mean, the heat waves that we had, I think these are all signs. Nanga Parbat, glaciers melting, and all these things. And again, if we don't do it as a responsible corporate citizen, I think we are doing ourselves and our future generation a very big disservice. So I think the trigger event is on a personal level very near and dear. And then obviously, if you're responsible and involved with some corporates, as most of us are, I think it's our responsibility to act as change agents. And that was really the trigger event for me personally, and something I've been very passionate about, and really hoping through various actions at a personal level and at the professional level we take, and through ENSOGOB and other agencies like this, we can make an impact and we can make a difference, because I think that will really is something I want to be looking back and saying made a difference.
Thank you, Shahzad. So you have converged onto the SDGs, and obviously it's benchmarking locally, and as a key funding institution within Pakistan's context, where a lot of businesses rely on you in terms of growth. So thank you very much for sharing your trigger from your institutional perspective. Now, Farooq, you have been mostly engaged with the brokerage, capital markets, and now in your current capacity you are leading the frontline regulator, and it is pretty much a melting pot of our key businesses put together in the indices that we all would like to follow. And for the last, I think, few weeks or maybe months, it has not been a pleasant sight for many. So just bringing it from a capital markets lens as a frontline regulator, as the driver for organizations that help access capital through the capital markets, would you like to share your journey in terms of if there is an ESG plan, if that has been triggered?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and also congratulations and best wishes to ENSOGOB for their launch and success. So there are a number of trigger points that have led PSX to focus, as Dr. Shamshad also mentioned, very much on ESG. Obviously, as our journey or our objectives are somewhat different, so we have a dual objective. One, as the frontline regulator, it's our responsibility to help the listed companies in particular, go down the ESG journey, and it is by no means an easy or a straightforward journey. And obviously, secondly, as a listed company ourselves, we have our own internal journey to make of being ESG compliant. And I know the focus, and currently with all the heat waves and all, the focus is on the E in the SG, but the S and the G, I believe, are equally important. And in fact, they're so inextricably linked, as Mohammad Ali was also saying, if you have the right governance, only then really can you have the sustainability and the environmental steps that need to be taken. So that's where that was one of the key trigger points. We were already as a frontline regulator responsible, along with the SCP, on the corporate governance code, which obviously is very much linked to the governance side of the ESG. And then thirdly, in the last few years, and the 2-3 years particularly, capital flows are increasingly being driven by ESG standards. And that was one of the key trigger points for us, that if our domestic companies do not start adopting ESG standards, let alone international capital flows, even domestic capital flows, and I'm sure Shahzad would touch upon it, bank financing, etc., will increasingly demand those standards. So the cost of capital for companies that are not compliant will go up, if not over time, completely cease. And I guess the last trigger point that was there was that I think it's a real opportunity. Brand Pakistan suffers from many issues, unfortunately. And if, as a corporate sector and as an exchange, we are able to move ahead decisively and ahead of the region in ESG compliance and in ESG reporting, and I agree with Mohammad Ali, if you look at particularly the Asian markets, our disclosure standards, accounting standards are absolutely world-class for listed companies in particular. So this is an opportunity for us to really move ahead, and it'll have a real impact on what brand Pakistan stands for. Personally, it's been an area of interest for me for many years. Even before joining PS6, while I was in London, I had, along with a few other colleagues and friends, founded Pakistan Environment Trust, which is working on this area in Pakistan, both with international and domestic partners. So it's a critically important area, but I'd just like to say that we should not underestimate the challenges. And in the last year particularly, there has actually been quite a setback globally in ESG and in greenwashing. SEC has started giving its first fines on global institutions like BNY Mellon. DWS, the CEO had to resign because there were misstatements in there, which is the largest asset manager in Germany. BlackRock's head of global sustainability resigned because he didn't believe that what was being said was actually being done. While we are on this journey, I think it's an opportunity for us to learn from these, what's gone wrong in international markets, so that we don't have to repeat those mistakes and we can leapfrog into better practices.
Thank you much, Farooq. So I think picking up on 3 points that you've mentioned, one related to the capital flows both internally as well as externally, and the opportunity that brings to Pakistan in terms of branding itself, leading this space. So if we put this all together, I think it's all about creating that environment of transparency, whether that's through reporting, whether that's through the practices that are being adopted, which create that levels of trust, both from the organizations that are operating, that are reporting, and the people that want to invest with them. And you talked about the challenge. I think it's more a challenge where people expect us to uphold that trust in terms of statements that we make, whether they are responsible and we are able to credibly own up to those. So Shaista Seed Ventures, it has been a wonderful journey. Being a social entrepreneurship focused organization, impact investment, very synonymous with ESG itself. So would you like, it will be great to hear your views in terms of what triggered an ESG plan setting within your organization.
So thank you, Asad. So Seed Ventures is primarily, we're a for-profit organization that works on creating social impact at an institutional, individual, community and organizational level. And when we talk about social impact, what we're basically looking at is when we're doing interventions with the public sector, with the private sector, or we're engaging with the corporate sector, whatever interventions that we're designing with them, we want their sustainability to be beyond just the scope of the program or the project that we're doing. But what is more important is when we're defining the scope with any of these institutions, it has to be about where the core of the problem lies. And I think one of the reasons that we decided to establish ENSOGOB with Matriarch was that a lot of organizations in Pakistan, we love to use the jargon, but we're not completely aware of what it encapsulates. So in order for sustainable interventions to take place, we need to identify the problem properly first. And that's where ENSOGOB comes in. So I think it's a marriage made in heaven, for us to have thought of this, that ENSOGOB would be focusing on the internal identification of where an organization is possibly going wrong, whether it is within the ambit of environment or social or corporate governance, and for then Seed to take the lead to develop interventions that are you can conduct on a sustainable basis. I'd like to give an example here of our flagship program, Enterprise Challenge Pakistan, which is very well aligned with organizations who are supporting the education aspect under their CSR interventions or sustainability. And we could have done one run of the program, one cycle, but we decided to develop it as a sustainable intervention with the help of the corporate sector, such so that it would align with the social themes under their specific ambit. So whatever interventions that were taking place, one, we don't want it to be just a project. Two, whatever we are designing, we wanted to go beyond the life cycle of just the project, which would mean that we have ambassadors and goodwill created for the project that can be in a strategic advantage to the organization that is participating, and then of course create an impact at a much larger scale. So for us, ESG as an institution and as an organizational leader, I truly believe that businesses cannot thrive if society fails. So that's like basic to whatever that we're doing. And as an institution, then we help them identify those problem areas and develop interventions that can not just serve their strategic objectives, but can also fulfill whatever goals they may have under environment, social, or their governance.
Thank you, Shaista. So I think this, in my understanding, converges to the 3 Ps, where I think for the first time people started thinking beyond the obvious P, which is profit, and the focus was on the planet and the people. You talked about community, simplifying problem identification and creating long-term impact within the project, beyond the project life. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Naz, from your perspective, having a very diverse professional background, both from a capital markets perspective in terms of advisory, as well as raising for the first time retail debt capital within the market, having worked in multiple organizations and now representing K Electric, which is an integrated power producer, the only such institution in Pakistan. So from your perspective, organizationally speaking, is there a trigger that has happened for the ESG plan to be put in place?
So, thank you for that, Asad. So, I think the trigger for a company like K Electric really is, it's a business imperative. I mean, you actually can't ignore it, because the kind of organization we are, the kind of potential impact that you have, how intertwined you are with community and the environment around you, environment in itself, climate, all of this impacts us. So for us, it really becomes a business imperative. I think as customers are looking for companies which have purpose, I think we don't lack on that count, because we're a company that actually has purpose embedded in our in our mission. For us, we have sort of crafted this around UN SDG goals 7 and 11. 7 relate to clean and affordable energy access, and 11 relates to sustainable cities. So for us, for example, on the energy side as well, when you talk about ESG, the environment, climate change is actually a reality for us, right? So climate change, now when we do our demand planning, we actually factor in an element for climate when we're looking at the kind of demand that is required. I mean, that's the impact that it's started happening. Urban flooding is a reality for us, right? So we're actually having to ensure that we work with communities, and that was a project Ensure that we did, where we actually had to work with the communities and invest and elevate infrastructure to ensure that we could operate sustainably. So we're now looking to add almost 1100 megawatts of clean energy, renewable energy, between now and 2030, primarily between solar and wind. So that's the SDG goal 7. And on goal 11, which relates to sustainable cities, we continue to work with the government of Sindh, with Heritage Foundation, other people where you're actually working with the communities. So I think that for us, it really is very, very much a business imperative. And then when you go out and, we've had from just right after privatization, you've had investors like IFC, you've had a lot of foreign investors in the company. So obviously this becomes a very, very critical component. You're a leveraged company, you are going out there to borrow. So for investors as well, this becomes a very important aspect as well, for you to be able to raise capital then. So for us, it's very important.
Thank you much, Naz. So you brought in 3 key components. First was the customer focus in terms of looking towards companies that have purpose. Then you brought the investor focus. And thirdly, it is in a business imperative, which means that it has to be embedded into the business plan. So I think we have seen multiple diverse, varied rationales for organizations to consider why they need to formulate a plan that is ESG focused and how to actually then benchmark and phase it. So starting with yourself, Shehzad, so you have been primarily representing the financial services within the banking sector. So organizationally speaking, what would be a key success story that you would like to share within the ESG plan implementation?
No, thanks. For us, it's been a very simple one, right? I think as one of the largest banks in Pakistan and also in the region, we have a pretty large presence. I think it's imperative upon us, and it's our national duty to really assist and help in that development of the ESG goals. And if I look at the SDG goals that we talk about, the 17, frankly, Pakistan has had a pretty poor performance. 12 out of 17, we have been, there's been no improvement. I know this is a day about talking the positives, but just setting the stage. If we look at our peer group rankings, we are at 59 versus even the region, forget about the West, that's running around 65, 66 in terms of scoring. So there's a lot that we need to do, and I think it's banks like us, it's institutions like the Yunus Brothers Group that Muhammad Ali represents, or what Farooq is doing, or what Hina is doing, and supporters like Seed Ventures and all that have to come together, and ENSOGOB gives that platform. So I think what we have seen, and I think Sadia laid it well, it's something that we would like to do, and it's something, it's important, and it's our duty, but it's also helps us. Selfishly, it's something that we have seen. Sadia was giving some stats that there has been if you look at the performance and correlation with companies that have been compliant with the ESG goals, have been outperforming not only the MSG index or even any developing market index. So I think that's what we hope and see. In my conversations with global investors, more so global investors than local investors, this becomes a very important topic. Every investor that I talk to globally and we have a large global investor holding in our stock, they want to know what are we doing and what are our plans. And if we don't do it, sooner or later they're going to exit, because they say, we love your story, but if there's a bank or if there's a corporate that's not doing it. So again, I just want to bring that upon us. And I think when we talk about these things, it's also about end-to-end. It's not just doing the things, it's also how are we doing. And I think Dr. Shamshad touched upon it, right? So we have 15,000 employees. We have hundreds and thousands of suppliers. Are we really talking to them about some of these goals? Are we, for example, goal number on gender equality, are we really asking them in their questionnaire to our suppliers what level of gender equality you have, what kind of corporate governance you have? And I think that's the mindset and that's the tone at the top that we need to bring in. But to bring that in, people need to realize that doing this is not nice to have. It's not ticking the box exercise. It's not appeasing Farooq Khan so that he can give me a clean bill of health when I go to him for a listing or a secondary issue. It's something that really helped me and help my organization. And I think it is helping organizations in becoming the sustainability point that Muhammad Ali touched upon. So in our case, as being a large financial institution and being social, doing the good corporate citizen, we picked a few, 1, 3, 5, and 8 are the 3 areas that we picked up in the SDG goals. And I think we've seen early successes. Talk about gender equality, something I'm very, again, passionate about. There, I think as an industry, we have not done well because we are sitting at 5% financial inclusion in bank accounts, if you look at it. And that number has been dead flat, like a dead man's heart rate. And I think what we need to do is create that environment. So we came up with these now designed products catering directly to the woman population, which is being not represented well. And we launched a program called Uruj, which in only 4 months, 4.5, 5 months, has been a resounding success for us. And what we realized is you can't have one size fits all. We were developing products that were just generalized and not taking into account some of the constraints some of the women have, especially when you go outside of the bigger cities, in terms of having even a simple, a SIM card in her name, or getting a permission and all sorts of things. In the interest of time, I won't get into that. Or if we look at how we are using our digital bank, which, by the way, today, yesterday got announced as the best digital bank for the 3rd year in a row by Euromoney, Asia Money, and I expect some claps on that. How are we using that to really get into the financial inclusion, and how are we creating these through our app and through our digital platforms, how we are trying to bring in the unbanked population, and that's a very large one. If we have only 40 million accounts compared to almost 5x that of SIMs, and we are a country with over 220 million bankable accounts, could be over 100 million, and we are sitting at 40 million. So and it's maybe 40 million, maybe if you look at it, 20 million bank accounts, 20 million wallets. So that's a very small number. And if we don't bring those people into the system, get them documented and really get that going. So I think that's a role the banks can play in bringing in documentation, governance, and sustainability. And that has been a big success for us, the digital bank, and how that has really helped us reduce our costs, improve our controls, and make most importantly, our customer journey second to none. And I think that's what we are focusing on. So that again helps on the whole getting things done. We open accounts. We've had a state bank competition where we open an account in minutes, the fastest bank to open an Asan digital account. And again, that's because we're investing in those things. And again, our thing was, it was doing the right thing, but it also was helping us bring in more business. So I think that as long as we have that, creating a decent work environment, making sure that we have the right policies and processes in place so people can feel comfortable and people can feel secure. Our younger generation, our sisters, our mothers, our brothers can all go and not feel threatened.
So thank you, Shahzad. I think the point that comes out from the success stories that you're sharing is that you're able to simplify it for yourselves, fit into what relates to yourself, and last but not the least, create bite-sized sprints, as was discussed earlier, so that you're able to achieve those small milestones and then evolve holistically using the SDGs lens for ESG. Thank you very much for sharing the UBL story. So, Ali, from your side, looking at the Yunus Brothers Group and the diversity that you have to manage, so any success story that you would like to share, as well as your top recommendation in terms of simplifying the ESG journey for organizations?
Okay. I think I would say that ESG, when it comes to implementation, it looks, that there's some cost involved. Yes, there is some upfront cost, which is involved to make sure that you reduce the impact on the environment and social areas. But trust me, the payback period, is the quickest, on these investments, 2 years, 3 years. And the capital, you can easily attract, from multilaterals to banks, and even from our state bank at a very concessional rate, So as Farooq said, that when you invest in these areas, money is available and at a much lower rate, than the market rates. So payback is actually fantastic. So I think the people who believe in all these areas, I think would understand that investment fear should go away, because as I said, that the payback is actually very good. So what we have done, across different organizations, because we have different environmental impact, from carbon footprint to recycling of materials, recycling of other, what you call raw materials, So let's say, for example, if I talk about ICI, so what we've done is that we have just put up a brand new recycled polyester plant, So what we're going to do is that we're going to collect all these PET bottles, and the waste, and convert that waste into fiber. So it's waste to fiber, and today the demand for these fibers in the world market is very high because everybody wants a sustainable product, a product which is being produced, in a most strict environmental, consideration. At Lucky Cement, we are producing close to 30% power without using any fuel, and now we are investing into solar and wind, So it will, from 30%, we're going to go up to 55% power across all our facilities without using any fuel, So that's going to have a major impact. And all is going to increase by my profitability at the end of the day. It's not something that, that you want to do it, but at the end of the day, it also helps business, for sustainability. Then at our textile businesses, so we're using the waste cotton, into yarns. We're using all the recycled water, which we produce. We use millions of gallons every day, and that water is then recycled and then reused, in our processes, impacting, huge water conservation, and already Karachi city, which has water shortage, so we're actually contributing in doing that. And we're not doing this since now, we've been doing this, since last 10, 15 years. And as I said, because people who are smart, who are entrepreneurs who understand, business risk association, they would understand and would invest, without even thinking, the paybacks and all that, because eventually it helped you, to implement these practices and create an environment for people, for you to become an example, and then people follow you, and then, it becomes a vicious, implementation cycle in which people try to follow and help and, improve.
So thank you, Ali. I think the key theme that is coming out in terms of the success stories that you are sharing is to break the myth that this is a cost center. Look at it as a profit center, and look at it as a way of reducing the cost and obviously adding that trust and confidence in the community around you in terms of supporting the ESG agenda. Thank you very much. So Farooq, again, you see, from your diverse lens, currently leading the frontline regulator, any success story that you would like to share and your top recommendation in terms of adopting the ESG journey?
Sure. In terms of, Dr. Shamshad mentioned, we've set up the task force, and the whole idea is that it is a complex journey, and we want to be inclusive. We want to take the input of all the stakeholders and develop a 3 to 5 year plan, during which the ESG standards and guidelines, can be implemented. So we're working with ACCA, ICAP, PICG, and obviously companies in the different sectors to evolve that. We have recently become members of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges globally, which provides us with a lot of support and guidance. We've included ESG criteria in our top 25 companies awards. Internally, we have a comprehensive diversity and inclusion, policy. 40% of, for example, my direct reports are now women. We have the first, woman chair of PSX. We have obviously women members on the board. So there are a number of these initiatives that we are taking, which I think hopefully will lead to greater success. And as I said, from PSX perspective, not just for PSX, but for the broader corporate sector. And I think to answer your second question, what it'll take for success, I think it's ENSOGOB is a good initiative because there is a shortage of expertise and knowledge and really good consulting advice that can be available. Companies that want to do it often struggle, how to move forward. But for smaller companies, it's important that it's at a price point, that they can afford as well. And I think the second thing which is important for success, and that's missing from this panel right now, is the government. Right, they have a hugely important role to play in this because we do have a dual challenge here. So even if a company or Lucky Group does all their, for example, contamination processing, etc. well, but if the government doesn't provide the right linkages for it to be disposed of properly, then it doesn't really lead to complete success for the country overall. So I think it is important that the government needs to get more and more engaged. There are efforts being made, but I think there is a lot more that needs to be done at the government front as well.
So thank you for, I think the theme that I was able to pick up was more around integration, was collaborative. No one organization or group will be able to do it alone, a point that was earlier picked up by Sajid as well. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, Farooq. Naz, from your perspective, the K Electric angle, any success story that you would like to share, and top recommendation from your side for anybody hoping to embark on the ESG journey?
Yeah, I think one of the big success stories from our side was, our Roshni Baji program. And this was a program where we actually inducted about 100 women, and we took them from communities within our areas, our service area, which were high-risk safety areas. And safety obviously is a really important element in our operations. So we actually trained them on safety. We trained them on how to tell people not to use illegal connections, other safe practices. We trained them in self-defense and motorbike riding. And I mean, the program itself was, and they went door to door to train people. And then they felt they wanted more information and they wanted to be trained further. So we actually trained them as female electricians. And they got certified as female electricians, the first female electricians. And we've now inducted some of them into our own company, and there are others that are working in companies like Philips and other places. So, I mean, for us, that was one very, very successful program where we took people from the community and we took women and we, put forward and made them, sort of employed them on an agenda that was very relevant to the company, and we brought sustainability on their side as well as on our side. And this was a program that was recognized by S&P Global. They have Platts Award, which is sort of the Oscars for the energy industry. So this was recognized by them as well. And I mean, if you're talking about in terms of, I think just on the lighter side, by the way, when I was reading this simplifying, it's simplifying the ESG journey for businesses. I was almost tempted to put a hand on the ESG, and I could speak for a day on simplifying the journey for businesses. I mean, just that in itself, is something that requires a lot of conversation. But I think on the ESG side, the most important thing when we want to keep it simple is if we can just understand the symbiotic relationship with our environment and our communities, you will always find places where you can intervene, and you just need to keep it simple.
Thank you, Naz. With your permission, Shaista, simply because you see ENSOGOB is driving this conversation. So in terms of the panel discussion, I'd like to thank all of you for sharing very crisp, very focused insights and bringing that success factor into the conversation. And the last point that Naz picked up was that how you're able to impact not just the organization. So we have talked about other areas, but the community that we're aiming to serve. So with this, the panel discussion is concluded, but I think we can spare some time for the audience, take a couple of questions if anybody has a question, starting with Mohammed Shoaib. Thank you very much. I think one of the largest institutional investors.
I think that's a really important point, and the task force is precisely working on that. And the plan is also that once we have a certain core number of companies in different sectors that are reporting, then to also have ESG index, which Pakistan are the few markets where there isn't an ESG index so far. But we need enough companies to report for index to be created.
Just a follow-up. So obviously index is the next step. But I think we need to kind of start.
Yeah. He needs a scorecard. A scorecard. So how's HBL doing versus UBL versus MCB? And obviously you know the answer. UBL is the best.
So thank you much, Vip. So Farhan, you wanted to ask a question.
First of all, thank you for some fantastic insights. Now, just picking up what this gentleman said, wanted to share something which perhaps all of you can take away and think about. So one of the things that's happening worldwide, is talking about metrics, is that the built environment actually contributes to 40% of greenhouse emissions, which is causing this climate change. 28% of it is operational and 11% is embodied. In this country, there is a complete disbalance between the private sector and the public sector in terms of investment, not just initial investment, but also the continuous import of fossil fuels and materials which we don't manufacture ourselves. To the tune of almost, I'd say, it's a 1:3 balance. So builders, because there is no code, the code exists, but there is no compliance or governance to ensure that our buildings are 3 times more energy efficient. We spend a lot more money importing materials, importing fuel. And so there is a business case, as Shazad said, for every one of these. And I think there is a common thread between what all of you are doing, whether it's lending to somebody if their product has a better business proposition by being more environmentally sustainable, or K Electric setting an energy budget, for example. Many countries of the Middle East do that. They will evaluate your project and say, we're not going to give you any more electricity now. Go back and make it work, whether it's a passive way of doing it because we want to retain our fuel import bill to a particular degree, or to the rating of countries. And I think Hamdan Saab is already doing many of those things. So it's just that. And two, I think there's got to be human resource capacity building. You need a lot of people to push this thing through, because you will be able to make those changes within your organization for if you're looking for bigger impact, and I think that's where ENSOGOB has
just to add to your point. So you see, I mean, everybody who's here today at this panel, we're all, I think, strong ESG advocates. But the problem is, there's this layer and then there's this layer, and it gets lost in translation. So when we're working with grassroots entrepreneurs, whether we're working with children, we're talking to them about the SDGs. We're talking to them about the environment, the social aspect, the governance, because it's important. And it's important that, collectively we start taking interventions that, maybe there's a system out there and there are frameworks available, but the man who's constructing the building, or, if he's a mid-level architect or a construction engineer, is he aware of those particular things? So the narrative has to be through and through. We can't expect the change to happen, unless we're translating it down the line. So that's something that we make it central to the kind of work that we do with Seed Ventures.
I think there's a lot of advocacy work to be done with the government and with the authorities as a jurisdiction. And Pakistan does have a building energy code which benchmarks the minimum performance in energy efficiency, and that translates into how much carbon are you really emitting.
Farhan, thank you much. I think the point that you picked up, the focus is around building that capacity. So there is awareness, there is advocacy, and I think we can probably give ourselves some credit starting. You see, charity begins at home, that in this event, we are not even using a single-use plastic material. You are being served water in glasses.
I think we deserve a round.
Thank you much. So Naseem sir, there was one question, hand raised by, if you could introduce yourself as well. Yourself, you had raised the hand. Yes, I'm speaking to you.
Yes, so thank you.
So Shazad, my suggestion would be that if we can probably close with this question, and Naseem Beg Saab ke saath exactly aaj subah yahi baat ho rahi thi. So he would be very helpful in sharing their journey within the Arif Habib group. So, and if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Yes, so I am Faiza, and I have recently joined Pakistan Environmental Trust as Program Director Net Zero Pakistan. I haven't had a chance to have introduction with you earlier, Farooq Saab, but yes, thank you so much. And I'm very excited because the landscape that I'm seeing in the corporate sector and generally overall is very encouraging. But at PET, we are trying to identify where the loopholes exist. And one of the things that we have noticed is that there's a lot of global opportunity available that Pakistan is unable to tap into. There's a lot of finance that the global north is committing will come to south, but the vehicles are not there, or the local corporate sector is not does not have the capacity to actually, pitch and get hold of those finances. So my question also, in one comment to Shahzad Saab, is that do we have any sort of institutional arrangements with DFIs like IFC where the corporate sector can actually create solutions and get those opportunities and those finances in? Because we have been talking to textiles also. We've been in touch with Yunus Textiles Group for signing up with SBTIs and signing up with NZPs. They're also our members. And one of the things they say is that they have internally addressed a lot of solutions, but if you want to step outside, for example, if you want to look into biogas generation, or if you want to look into
Faiza, if you could
solar
just
panels.
articulate a question, if there's any. This is the context in terms of the work that you're doing, if there's any specific question.
Yes, one question to Shahzad Saab is about any institutional arrangements with DFIs regarding getting the catalytic financing, and one question to Muhammad Ali Tabba Saab regarding, focusing on ventures that would support the larger textile and other industries in terms of sustainable investment. So are we thinking on those lines and investing into solutions that are sustainable outside the regular corporate, that regular work that you're doing, regular businesses?
I think today we are focusing, because we have such a large group of companies, that we're trying to make sure that each company complies with, environment and governance and social side. Going outside, I think will take time, because first we need to create a framework, a strong framework within our own organizations, and implement it. And then, once we have these successes, then we can actually look outside and try to see how we can contribute in that area.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and to your question towards me, absolutely. IFC has a rep office in Pakistan, and they work with the corporates directly and even through intermediaries like us, where clearly they have certain no-go areas. There's certain sectors that they won't touch because they're not environmentally friendly, and they will support ones that they feel are really helping the ESG goals and showing that commitment. So absolutely, and not just IFC, there are many multilateral, CDC and many others who absolutely are now very focused on that. So to my earlier point, I think there is going back to that earlier comment, demand and supply, dono taraf se you're seeing a good mix. And I think the winners will be the ones who take advantage of that. And I think the ones who ignore it will, end of the day, find it to be in a very bad position.
So thank you, Faiza, for the question.
Could I just add to that, because that's a really important point for corporates and generally for Pakistan, that there is a lot of funding which Pakistan doesn't take advantage of. And that was one of the reasons at that time why we started Pakistan Environment Trust. I remember looking at the Green Climate Fund, this was 3-4 years ago now, and they had allocated either 100 or 150 million dollars for Pakistan, and Pakistan had drawn down $1 million of that.
And Naseem Saab has, I think, also some ideas on this. Exactly, and I think.
Yeah, and there are many others, such organizations that have allocated funds for Pakistan, which we need desperately, but we don't have the counterparties here, who can actually pitch and absorb, that kind of funding.
Thank you, Farooq. And I think we'll conclude with a point that Naseem Beg Saab wants to make.
Thank you. Just a very quick comment. Pakistan has an environment already for ethical investing. Ensure that there's way in place-based ethical investing. So he didn't need the government coming in and supporting him. He didn't need special financial institutions supporting him. He just led the way. He's created an index on Goset Sharia compliant investing, with the stock exchange as a part of its regular structure. Just follow him. It's ethical investing at the end of the day. There's nothing too different. It's just that on a faith-based ethical investing, he's taken a lead. This is a part of the ethical investing that all of us need to think and talk about.
Thank you much. And so a round of applause for our esteemed panelists. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to our moderator. MC, thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists for an amazing discussion. And now just for our closing remarks, I would like to direct your attention to the screen for a video by Faraz Khan, co-founder and director of ENSOGOB.
Assalamualaikum ji. Can you guys hear me? Hello? Assalamualaikum ji. First of all, thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me, as it's not a video. Assalamualaikum ji. Can you guys hear me? Hello? Assalamualaikum ji. First of all, thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me, as it's not a video. Hear me? Assalamualaikum ji. First of all, thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me, as it's not a video. Assalamualaikum ji. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? All right. Apologies for this. First of all, thank you so much. Mike, you've been an absolute supporter, and thank you for hosting it. It's absolutely befitting post COP26 that we're hosting this event and the launch of ENSOGOB here. I want to thank Dr. Shamshad, Sadia, and all the panelists. I'll be very quick and brief. There were some amazing conversations, and picking up from what Dr. Shamshad said, that we need a collaborative and consolidated approach to address the challenges and reap the benefits of the opportunities that ESG can create for Pakistan's ecosystem. And we need to move the needle from short-term to medium and long-term, and that can only happen if stakeholders and institutions like yourselves come together. There are 4 levels of bridges that we need to kind of build with the threads of ESG. One is the internal organizational and institutional bridges with the value chain and supply chain of the institutions that they're linked with. Then linking the brand Pakistan and our interventions with the wider world and the communities, and especially the investor community that is absolutely looking towards investing in the ESG environment. And then hopefully, with times to come, lead in this space. I was in Dubai a few weeks ago, and there are 2 ESG funds being deployed, and the challenge of these funds is not raising that money, but was of deployment. They need to actually have institutions across the sectors to be investor ready, and that is the challenge that we need to address. And that capital and the availability of the capital is absolutely there. We just need to create these bridges and bring our institutions and overall environment to a level where that capital deployment becomes easy. Farooq, thank you so much for leading on these issues through PET and through PSX. Ms. Naz, Ali, and Shahzad, thank you for your comments and thank you for your leadership and sharing your not only your vision but the intention to actually collaboratively take this whole initiative forward. So immense amount of thanks from ENSOGOB and looking forward to creating a better future for our generations to come. Thank you so much.
So that just brings us to the end of the event. But before we depart, I would like to call Sajid and Shaisa to the front to offer some tokens of appreciation. Firstly, we would like to call Mike. Could we please now have the panelists come to the front one by one? Could we please have Muhammad Ali Tabba come to the front? Next, could we please have Shahzad Dada? Could we next please have Farooq Khan? And next, could we please have Naz Khan? Are you getting one? Asad. And could we please also have Asad come to the front for his token? So that brings us to the end of the event. Thank you everyone for coming today. Group photo? Okay. Everyone? Or the panelists? Okay. Thank you everyone. Please help yourself to some refreshments.